School of Human Ecology last year. And I'm here to present my research, which I did for my master's dissertation. My research largely dealt with ecological restoration. So when it starts, it will show you a picture of my study area, and it will be really red. And this is not the first slide. Okay, so yeah. All right. So this is my study area actually. So the land, it is not so red in this, but okay. So it's looking so red because of huge deposits of iron and manganese. So iron and manganese is being mined in this area. Also, the area has dense forests, tropical dense forests, which are seeing a decline in the forest cover because of mining. So this has given us an opportunity to do ecological restoration in the area. Now, ecological restoration generally, largely when it is practically done, it deals with the scientific theories. For example, it will focus on succession, community ecology, or population ecology, but there is this human factor which is generally left behind. So my study deals with how the local population there could be incorporated in the restoration which is going on in the area. So this picture largely sums up what are the three major things in my dissertation. It is the forest, the human habitation, which is largely tribal in the area, and the mining, iron ore and manganese ore. So within this larger perspective of studying ecological restoration in the realm of tribes, forest and mining, our specific objectives were: first, to understand the present natural resource use of communities which are living in the proximity of the mining area. And secondly, to explore inclusion of local needs and ethno-biology in an ongoing restoration project. So this community which is living in the proximity of mining area and a restoration project is situated in the border areas of Jharkhand and Odisha. So the mining site and the restoration plot, which both belong to SAIL, are in Odisha, whereas the village where I conducted my study, these are the 7 colonies within the village. This village is in Jharkhand. As I mentioned, the area has dense forests, tropical moist deciduous forest. The most dominant tree is sal. There are huge deposits of iron and manganese, and the population predominantly consists of tribes. Predominantly means 82% of the population is tribal, and mainly Birhor and Munda tribe reside there. Birhor tribes deserve a special mention because these are wandering tribes, and these have been recently settled in the village. Recently means in early 2000s. So yeah. So they were settled in the village in early 2000s. Munda have been living in the village for a longer time. So to understand the general social and ecological history of the area, firstly, we surveyed literature and did secondary data study. Next, we did some transect walks with key informants, some focus group discussions, and semi-structured questionnaire. This was largely to understand the current social structure of the village and what is their present natural resource use, do they indulge in agriculture, what's their employment scenario, what's the livestock scenario, and things like those. Lastly, to understand what are the demands of people and what are the needs of people in accordance with the restoration project, or how to incorporate people or involve people in the restoration project, we conducted choice experiments. Now, choice experiments are a way to elicit response from people from 2 or more choices to understand their preference about something. For example, in this case, we were trying to understand what they would like to have as the restoration project. So we created 6 choices specifically based on ecological and social trade-offs. What we did was, for example, choice 1 was native forest. What we did was, we had 6 attributes which we rated along a scale of 5. So for example, in native forest, you would have wood rated 3 and high resistance to invasive species. But let's see the next example, which is NTFP garden. There would be no wood and resistance to invasive species would be lower than the native forest. But there would be fiber, and cultural means they might have medicinal plants there or sacred plants there, so they still have that cultural connection, so it's rated high. Then there is native forest patches with grassland, so it's high, it rates high on fodder. Then there is tree plantation, high on wood, rated high on wood. Then there is multi-purpose plantation, which is basically a combination of all the previous 4 choices. Then lastly, we had park. Obviously, ecotourism is 4 and 5 for this. So what we saw was the villagers, they had moderate to heavy utilization of forest. Almost every household, actually every sampled household collected something or the other from the forest, and the maximum collection was of fuel wood. The other uses being food, religious purposes, medicine, and for timber. One specific thing needs to be mentioned here is the use of fiber. So this Birhor tribe, which was recently settled, they collect the bark of this tree, Bohinia bali, and they make basket and ropes from this. And they send these items in the local markets. So it's a major source of income for them. The results of choice experiments show us that the most preferred choice for the people there is native forest. 39% of the people preferred native forest, where it is followed by preference for NTFP garden, and then tree plantation. When we compare the choice preference among Birhor and the people who have been living there for longer, we found that 46% of the Birhors prefer the native forests, and 36% of the people who have been living there for longer prefer this. This was basically to see if the wanderers who have been living in the forest have a higher preference for native forests or not. We also compared the choice experiments with various other variables to see if there is any relation, and we found that gender and the kinds of source of income have significant effect on the choices they are making. So for example, gender basically, the first preferred choice, as in the choice that got most votes, it was native forest, but the choice that was opted, that got second most votes, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, but so the second most preferred choice for males, it was the timber tree plantation, and for females, it was NTFP garden. Okay, so the second most preferred option for the males was tree plantation, and for females it was NTFP garden. Our logic to explain this is that females who go in the forest to collect NTFP and food products might prefer it more, and males who actually collect wood and timber from the forest to make houses and to sell it in the market, that is why they might prefer that is why they are preferring the tree plantation more. Next important result was that the choice preference was was affected by the kinds of source of income. Now, kinds of source of income is, we divided the sources of income into 3 kinds. First, temporary, which is if they are engaging in some wage work. Secondly, some permanent employment. For example, if they are working in mines as drivers or unskilled laborers. And thirdly, they do not have any formal employment, but they just sell products that they make from things they collect from forest. So we found that the people who do not have any formal employment and are totally dependent on forests for income, almost 50% of those prefer the native forest. But people who have permanent employment, their preference for native forest is only about 32%. So we are seeing here that already people who are not dependent on forests so much, they are deviating from their choice of native forest. They do not want native forest as much. So this is basically, so we are seeing that the needs and relation to the forest in a village across community are different. Like the kinds of source of income they have, or yeah, so the kinds of sources of income that they have, or this is just to show that they have different preferences. All of them do not want just one single thing, or just native forests which are present there or which they have been using since a very long time. And There are ecological imperatives as well, which is ecological theories that make the selection of ecological restoration goal difficult, because there are things like in this patch, according to ecology, if these native plants can be regrown because there has been mining, so the line might have degraded. So it already complicates things in defining what the ecological restoration goals might be. And these complexities are further increased by the needs and demands of the local populations. So in this case, is inclusive restoration possible? Well, we argue that the argument is not to say yes to all the demands of the people, but to incorporate them to an extent, to an adequate and a possible extent, to whatever extent their demands can be incorporated in the restoration plan. Opponents actually leave the area and there is no iron ore or something, so that restored patch would be left out to the people there, so their demands should be incorporated. Considering this, the recommendation to the restoration plan is native forest, because it is, well, it got the maximum votes, and also it's ecologically preferred. Limitations to the study. Okay, the first thing is we found while conducting the choice experiments that 6 is a big number, so we might have had 2 or maximum 3 choices, because it decreases the confusion, and many attributes, actually the ratings were overlapping over the different choices, so people got confused in selecting. So for example, if they want trees, so the option of trees was, or wood, sorry, it was quite high for both tree plantation and native forest, so it might have affected the results. Secondly, this one point which Bodhaditya actually pointed out while my Viva research Viva, that we should have included the attribute of time, how much time it would take for the particular choice to come up in the restoration patch, because obviously the native forest will take more time to establish than to make a park in the restoration patch. So that time difference would affect the choice a person might make. And lastly, and this is not a limitation per se, but a precaution, we have seen that only 39% of the population have preferred, 39% of the sampled population have preferred native forests, and 61% of the sampled households have already changed their preferences. I mean, they do not want native forests, they would rather have parks or NTFP gardens or other choices. So their preferences are changes. So how intelligent is inclusive ecological restoration in this scenario, when, you know, it's like we are incorporating their demands, but their demands are changing daily, or maybe not daily, I'm exaggerating, but the demands are changing. So how intelligent is inclusive ecological restoration? So, and this is to conclude the study, we say that inclusive ecological restoration increases complexity and is difficult, but it is possible. What we need to remember is to have a restoration plan that adequately addresses the demands and limitations of ecology as well as society. Thank you.
If you could throw some light on the sampling, and excuse me if I missed it, but did you interview the head of the household, or did you interview the elder man and woman of the household? How did you do that? Especially because you have gender disaggregated results, so how did you do that? Thank you.
Okay, so we randomly selected 30% of the households, and then we interviewed an adult from the household. There were some households in which two adults were interviewed, and those were the households from which at least one was male and other was female. But there were households in which only a single female is interviewed and then only a male is interviewed. So that way.
So just continuing that year-old conversation, I think, this is not a question, but just a comment. I don't know if I can articulate it very well, but see, social identities like caste, tribe, and gender, there's a debate in social sciences about how far do social identities actually determine individual life choices, right? So, so for example, if 30%, if you ask the social group of Birhors what they want, and let's say 30% say they want a native forest, or 56% say they want a native forest, can you say that a majority of Birhors as a social group want a native forest? I can't explain this to you very well, but basically individual life choices are determined by a variety of things. So like Ritu was asking, what stage of life is a person in? Are you asking a very old person, or are you asking a very young person? What is his current livelihood? What is his future livelihoods option? So this is a very tense relationship between, so our individual's position is determined by the place, by kind of structures around of society, but at the same time they make choices that are free from those, are relatively independent of those structures. I don't know whether.
Actually, yeah, I agree with it, and I myself do not believe so much in statistics, and yes, gender and all those identities. This is just to give an indication of what differences are, and in what sense differences might be there. This is not like written in stone. Okay, this is that, this is that. So this is an indication. It's not to be taken too seriously, or sorry, my study is to be taken too seriously. but but the numbers, they are just indications. They are not like yahi hai.
At some of that contingent valuation, is this something related to contingent choice literature? What kind of literature are you drawing on? I mean, what got you to try all this out?
Okay, we started with contingent valuation, but we reached this because we wanted to restrict our choices. Contingent valuation broadens the scope. So we wanted, okay, sorry, these are the choices which are possible based on ecology of the area and based on the history of the area. So we started off with contingent valuation, willingness to pay and all that stuff, but we reached here because we wanted to restrict our choices. So while reading all that literature, and there are also studies done. Choice experiment largely is actually uh, it is usually used in the for example, in case of vehicles, what particular kind of mileage you want, or things like those. In marketing, to know the preference of consumer. So from where we used it here, to know the preference of people who are living in the village for ecological restoration.
I have a question both for you and Buddha, because there's a bit of time and it's reacting to his point. Now, what you're doing here is quite interesting actually, because they're doing a restoration exercise, right? And you want to do the restoration which is responsive to the community. So the challenge is, how do you do that, right? Given what you said is perfectly fine. You know, there are these structures and we have this, because usually social scientists don't do things, right? So then the challenge is, come on. So if you're doing the restoration and you want to, what do you do then? What would you suggest? In a way, what she's done gives you a sense of, okay, maybe we do these species.
I don't know. I would probably not do a. So I would not give them 6 choices. Let's say that A, B, C, D, E, or I think I'd come up with a methodology which is more, which takes more time and tries to kind of understand livelihoods. For example, in different individuals within the household, their livelihoods. What are their expectations?
Or maybe do something like the what caravan. Maybe you have some views on.
I don't know what I don't know what I'd do. Social scientist. I'm not.
Say Vikram, that on this point, I mean the exercise is fine. I agree entirely actually with Vikram here. You have to. There is a time limit here. There is a way in which these things are done. So this is obviously a very substantial, significant improvement to that. right? And if this is the industry norm that now, that is a very good thing. What I'm saying is that my point is that the choice, the decision and the direction that you take could be also more politically informed a little bit, in the sense that you mentioned a little bit, but not specifically, in terms of which are the margins in this given society, who are you looking at as your community that you want to sort of foreground, right? Maybe women, maybe you want to do that, maybe then it's not just exercise of ki total number mein se kya percentage hai, but specifically targeting it to, on those lines, etc. So on that account you could probably think a little more.